Hi everyone, in this tutorial I want to give you a quick guide on SEO in Next.js, including metadata, Open Graph metadata, robots file, sitemap, and structured data. First, how do we add metadata in Next.js? There are two ways, static metadata and dynamic metadata. To add static metadata, you need to add them in your regular page.tsx component. First, you need to export a constant named metadata. If you are using TypeScript, you can give it the type metadata from Next.js. Now the object exported with this constant can have any meta tag you want, like title and description. The other way is dynamic metadata. Say we need to fetch a blog post and get its title to add it to the metadata. This time, instead of simply exporting a constant named metadata, we will need to export a function named generate metadata. This function can be a regular function or an async function in case you want to fetch some data like post title, as we will see in this example. The function takes in params and search params as arguments, just like the page component. In this line, we will get the current ID from params. After that, we will fetch the corresponding post from our API. Then finally, we can return our metadata object, which has the same type of metadata and works exactly like the static metadata. Now let's explore Open Graph metadata. Open Graph metadata simply controls how your website appears when shared on other platforms. For example, when you share a YouTube link to x.com, Open Graph metadata is what makes a preview of your video appear like this. YouTube doesn't monopolize this power. You can do the same for your own website with Open Graph metadata. The Open Graph protocol website has a list of every Open Graph metadata in existence you can use. Now back to code. To add Open Graph metadata in your Next.js app, it's simply the same as any other metadata. Say we want to add images from the post. All we need is to add an Open Graph object inside the metadata object and add in any Open Graph tags we want, like the images array. Robots file. Robots.txt is a file that lets you give instructions to web crawlers like Googlebot about which pages they can or cannot access, in addition to linking your sitemap, which we will cover later in this tutorial. You can go ahead and simply add a static robots.txt file inside your app directory and it will work. This is an example of a simple robots.txt file. Here we are stating that these instructions are for all users agents, like Googlebot. Here we are telling it that we allow user agents to crawl all pages after a slash. So basically all pages of our site. But just don't crawl our private pages, which URLs are after a slash private. And here we are pointing crawlers to our sitemap, which we will talk about in the next section of this tutorial. But you can also use the magic of Next.js to create a dynamic robots.ts file, and that will convert to a regular robots.txt file during build. To generate robots file dynamically, first you need to create a file named robots.ts in your app directory. From that file, you need to default export a function named robots. This function will simply return an object with the type metadata route.robots, which will then be used to construct your robots.txt file. The dynamic robots file comes in handy when you want to dynamically get the base URL of your website to attach your sitemap like this. This will be the output result of your dynamic robots.ts file. Sitemap is basically a list of all pages in your website that you want web crawlers like Googlebot to crawl and index efficiently. This is an example of a sitemap. Sitemap is an XML file that lists all the important pages and provides metadata about them, such as the URL of the page, list update date, the change frequency, and the priority or relative importance to other pages. You can think of the sitemap as an array of URLs that you want web crawlers to pay attention to. Just like robots.txt, you can go ahead and simply add a static sitemap.xml file to your app directory, but that's barely useful. In most situations, you will need to pull in data from your database or an external API to construct all the different URLs. Dynamic sitemaps. To create a dynamic sitemap, first you need to create a file inside your app folder named sitemap.ts. Then you need to export a sitemap function that will return you sitemap. Make sure to give it the return type metadata route.sitemap that comes from Next.js. The return value of your sitemap is simply an array of URLs. Here your sitemap is simple and consists only of homepage, about page, and blog page. Finally, the output for your dynamic sitemap will look like this. To view the output for your sitemap, you can visit your website URL /sitemap.xml. Now say we want to fetch data asynchronously and construct our sitemap based on this data. We can easily convert our sitemap function into an async function. And here we normally fetch our data. Let's say we are building an e-commerce website and we need to fetch products. So we will fetch them from our database or perform an API request to our backend depending on our system. And here we can simply map these products, and for each product return a sitemap URL like this. Structured data. There are a few main formats for structured data, but we'll just focus on JSON-LD, which is the one recommended by Google and the one you are gonna see most common. Structured data is a way to provide search engines with extra information about your website content. For example, when you search Google for a recipe, the reason they appear as cards on Google like this is structured data. There are several types of structured data to choose from. So if you have a recipes website and you want your recipes to show up on Google as cards, you will need to add the recipe structured data. I'm not gonna cover every type of structured data in this tutorial, but I'm gonna leave the relevant resources to learn more about them in the description box. Let's get straight into how to add JSON-LD in your website. The official recommendation is to add JSON-LD in either the page component or layout component. So let's say we have an e-commerce website and we want to add the structured data for products. First, we'll be fetching our product ID by ID, and then we will be adding our JSON-LD as a normal JavaScript object. We are adding properties like type, name, image, and description, as these properties are not arbitrary. Actually, they come from the product schema. You can find the complete documentation of these different JSON-LD schemas in the description box. And then we will have to add our JSON-LD schema inside an actual script tag with this specific type application/LD plus JSON. And inside that script, there will be our JSON-LD object, added as a JSON string.